Tonight, Hurricane Fiona and its legacy. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in Atlantic Canada, along with the various Atlantic premiers of the Atlantic provinces. Liberal MP Yasir Naqvi will join me coming up to discuss the latest on that. Also coming up, NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh will join me to discuss NDP priorities in the coming weeks of the fall session of Parliament and where his supply and confidence deal with the government is at. Also, the latest in the House of Commons and Liberal versus Conservative versus NDP priorities.
Taxes on the working poor. And yet that is exactly what the minister admits she will do. She admits that raising the EI premiums, the EI payroll taxes, will take $2.5 billion extra dollars out of the hands of Canadian workers, and not to fund EI. She also admits through her own public filings that the government will take $10 billion more in EI taxes than it will pay out in benefits, money that the Prime Minister will raid from the account and spend however he likes. Will the Prime Minister get his hands off the EI fund and the paychecks of our workers?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the EI contribution rate today is 1.58. Next year, it'll go up to $1.63. Both of those rates are lower than the EI contribution rate was in every single year when Stephen Harper was Prime Minister. Yet the new Conservative leader, who was actually the employment minister during those years, now wants to slash our contributions. So who do the Conservatives think was the better economic manager, Prime Minister Harper or their new leader?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, we were terrific economic managers together, and we will be again. So I'm just getting a little practice in on answering questions, Mr. Speaker. We'll be doing more of it when we're in government soon. But in fact, EI payments have gone up for the average $60,000 a year worker from $930 when I was the minister to $948 now. That's a small increase, but the big $2.5 billion tax increase is just ahead. This minister admits the money won't even go to EI. It'll go to government spending. Why won't they get their hands off the EI fund and the paychecks of our workers?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Speaker, in 2015, a Canadian earning $49,500 a year paid $931 in EI premiums. Next year, that same Canadian will pay $807.
The ongoing cost of living issue plus COVID-19 border measures being lifted, all issues being discussed on Parliament Hill. Where do the various parties fall into each of those respective issues? How do they align with each of those issues? MPs are here to debate that coming up. Hello there. We'll begin tonight with the ongoing situation relating to Hurricane Fiona. The Prime Minister currently in Atlantic Canada today, and he will be there again tomorrow. We'll begin our coverage tonight with Liberal MP Yasir Naqvi, who's also Parliamentary Secretary to the Emergency Preparedness Minister. He joins me now from the foyer of the House of Commons this evening. Yasir Naqvi, why don't you just start out with the ongoing situation as it relates to Hurricane Fiona? How is your government working with the various Atlantic provinces to ensure that the devastation can be resolved as quickly as possible?
Yeah, first and foremost, of course, our thoughts goes to all the people who have been severely impacted by Hurricane Fiona. It has had a devastating impact on Atlantic Canada and Eastern Quebec. We have seen a lot of damage that has taken place to property, to infrastructure, and unfortunately there has been a couple of fatalities as well, and some people have injured, and so a lot of sympathy to their families. Right now, our government is working very closely with the provincial governments and local municipal authorities in making sure that we are recovering from the storm. A large parts of Atlantic Canada have no electricity at the moment, so there's a big effort in making sure that hydro crews are able to access those areas, that trees that have come down are being removed from the roads, and power is being restored. So that work is ongoing. That's an immediate work. that needs to take place before we get into the next phase of reconstruction.
And when you look at reconstruction, when you look at how the various Atlantic provinces will, I guess, work to resolve some of the stuff that has happened with Hurricane Fiona, how will your government support, whether it's funding, et cetera, to the various provinces?
Yeah, our government is very much committed to not only the recovery phase that we are going through right now, but also the reconstruction phase. The Prime Minister is in fact visiting Atlantic Canada at the moment. Our various ministers have been in contact with premiers and their counterparts, and we are making sure that all supports are available to them. For example, when we receive requests for assistance from 3 provinces, the Canadian Armed Forces are there on the ground with the recovery process. There are established government programs that gives funding opportunities for the provinces when we are going through the reconstruction project process. Of course, we are going to work very closely with the provinces as we determine the extent of the damage, the cost associated with it. But we want to make sure and ensure Atlantic Canadians, Eastern Quebecers, the federal government will be there as long as it takes to get the reconstruction done and get people's lives back on track.
And when you look at the various provincial governments that are in the various provinces and territories, there was a little bit of a back and forth between Nova Scotia's Premier Tim Houston yesterday and the Public Safety Minister's office. The Nova Scotia Premier saying that there were some problems at the border. How can you, I guess, overcome some of those issues to ultimately work to resolve the situation and resolve life to get it back to normal for people in Atlantic Canada?
Yeah, our focus is right now to help as many people as possible. Our focus right now is to make sure that the recovery process goes without any delay whatsoever. And that is why the work that's happening through Canadian Armed Forces with local workers. We've seen hydro crews coming from other parts of the country as well. Just today, Hydro One crew left from Ontario. Yesterday, Hydro Ottawa has gone down to Nova Scotia as well. That is the big focus because people need electricity. I've been talking to a lot of my colleagues from both sides of the House, and that's what I'm hearing from members of parliaments who represent Atlantic Canada and Eastern Quebec, is that they want focus on getting debris removed, trees removed, so people can start accessing their workplaces, can get groceries, but most importantly to restore electricity.
And just lastly, some of the economic challenges that have been caused, some of the financial damage, obviously lots of that has happened because of Hurricane Fiona. How will your government work to, I guess, make up for some of that economic and damage that has happened in Atlantic Canada?
Yeah, of course, lives have been disrupted and businesses are disrupted as well. And that's why I think this recovery phase is so important, so that we can get business resumed as quickly as possible. Listen, there's no sugarcoating it. The damage is extensive. This has been a very significant storm that has battered Atlantic Canada and Eastern Quebec. So there's a lot of work needs to be done, but that's our big focus at the moment.
Okay, Liberal MP Yasir Naqvi, Parliamentary Secretary to the Emergency Preparedness Minister. Yasir Naqvi, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, for more on some of the biggest issues currently facing the House of Commons and that it's been discussed, but specifically to discuss the NDP priorities for the upcoming fall session, the session that we are currently in of Parliament, as well as what the NDP would like to see. It's supplying confidence deal with the government. A lot of topics to get to, and who better to get to those topics with than NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh, who is with me now. Mr. Singh, let's just begin. Your supply and confidence deal with the government that was originally signed in back in March. How satisfied are you with how that deal has progressed? Specifically, I mean, I know you've said recently that New Democrats aren't prepared to bend any further on the dental care aspect of things.
We've made really good progress. The Liberals had voted against dental care with the Conservatives a year ago, and a year later, we're passing legislation to get dental care started for kids under 12. So this is going to make a big difference in the lives of so many people. I spoke with the CEO of CHIO, which is a children's hospital in the Ottawa region. He said the major surgery that they perform is for kids for their dental dental surgery, and that surgery could be completely prevented if they got preventative dental care services. And so we'll be helping lots of kids out, and it's going to make a big difference in their lives.
And looking at things more broadly, I guess just relating to what the NDP would like to see done in the upcoming fall session of Parliament, where should the government's priorities be at this point?
The number one priority is the cost of living going up and what we do to make life more affordable. That's our major focus. That's actually where everything comes back to. The doubling of the GST rebate, putting more people's own money back in their pockets. That's to help with the cost of living. Even the dental care is really for families that can't afford it. It's going to save a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of financial pressure off of families. We also got the rental benefit out to families that are renting. These are all ways to make life a little bit more affordable. And we just tabled our motion to get to the bottom of the cost of food, the price of food. And what we feel is price of food that's increasing, driven by the CEO greed. And we are not strangers to that in Canada, because there was price fixing that was found to have occurred in 2018 when it comes to the price of bread. So we're really pushing on this, and something really important. The major things we want to see is ending fossil fuel subsidies.
And then just lastly, before we conclude, what should the government be doing? We see right now, I mean, it's been kind of reiterated, especially during Hurricane Fiona, something that has impacted many Canadians in Atlantic Canada specifically, and in Eastern Quebec. What should the government be doing to address some of those ongoing concerns surrounding the environment, surrounding climate change, etc.?
This is public money that's going to profitable oil and gas companies that shouldn't be. Instead, it should be invested in the clean energy we need. It should be invested in giving families some help to switch their energy needs, to find ways to make sure people can heat and cool their homes in a more efficient way, to find ways to reduce the emissions from transportation, from buildings, and find ways to invest in jobs that will be long-lasting and permanent and help us reduce emissions. So those are kind of the general principles, but the fundamental thing is we need to be putting all of our money towards future, and that means reducing emissions and creating good jobs.
Okay, NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh. Jagmeet, thanks so much for your time. Joining me now are three MPs from the different parties. Greg Fergus is a Liberal MP and Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister. Matt Genereux is an Alberta Conservative MP, and Taylor Bachrach is a British Columbia NDP MP and that party's transport critic. Greg, I'll start out with you. What do you make of how the first fall session of Parliament has gone? What do you make of, obviously, your government unveiled some new affordability measures. How will those measures help Canadians?
Those are three really good questions. So I think the first one, let's talk about the most important one, coming to aid of Canadians during this period of rising prices. I think it's the measures which have been introduced by the government actually, and in a sense, not surprisingly, has found support from all the main parties in the House to double the GST tax credit, so that Canadians who are the least vulnerable, the least able to handle these rising prices have an opportunity to have some income which is being brought forward. I think that's a good sign. I think that also is a good sign, Wyatt, is that when you move away from maybe the passion of question period, what I've noticed in the two committees in which I'm on is that there's been a real broad consensus of all MPs to work cooperatively together to get things done. I say that as a member of the Ethics Committee as well as a member of the Procedure and House Affairs, where really everyone has put a little water in their wine because times are serious and we need to work together.
And Matt, what do you make of those new affordability measures unveiled by the government? And I guess when will Conservatives announce whether or not they will support or not support those measures?
Well, I can announce that we're supporting the GST rebate. I don't know if that's an announcement. That's something we've been talking about for a while. But from the other perspective of the other bill, because there's two bills before us right now, we're not supporting that for a variety of reasons. It ties into some of the dental care benefits as well. So it's not just the rental affordability. But if I can also just take a quick minute to talk about how the House has come back, I think it's an incredibly important time for all of us to be working together. I think we're here on the cusp of what some are saying is the end of COVID or a break or whatever that means. But it's certainly a time where Canadians are looking for more of that collaboration together, and be able to sit with these two gentlemen who are, I also call them friends, but also to be able to work together to do some of the good work that the House needs is certainly refreshing, at least in the first week back.
And Taylor, not only is the House back, but your private member's bill is also coming up tomorrow. What do you make of how the first couple of weeks of the fall session have gone?
Well, thanks, Wyatt. Like my colleagues have said, this is a really important time in Canada. There's a lot of folks out there who are struggling. The rising cost of living is affecting so many people, most of all those on limited and fixed incomes. So I do think there's some cross-party collaboration that we're seeing right now, trying to get help to the people who are struggling the most. Things like doubling the GST rebate, which is something we've been pushing in the House of Commons for months. Also, the top-up to the Canada Housing Benefit, which is going to help families that earn less than $35,000. And then the third thing, thinking back in history, well before I was born in the 1960s, it wasn't even a distant memory, but we had a minority parliament in Ottawa with the NDP holding the balance of power. And we were able to use our position in Parliament to force the then Liberal government to bring in the Canada Health Act and bring in universal health care, such an iconic policy. And we're back there again, and we're fighting for a national dental care plan so that we can finally have dental care be part of our universal health care system. And you might get some differing opinions, but as a New Democrat, that's something I'm really proud to be a part of. I think it's going to be a historic period of time for our country, and something that generations to come are going to benefit from.
Well, then let me go back to Greg and kind of pick up on that. Taylor mentioned some of the dental care aspects of things. That was one thing that was a part of the supply and confidence deal between the government and the NDP. Where is that deal at, and how soon can Canadians see some of that relief?
Well, I think Canadians are already seeing a lot of things which are being brought forward that many parties had in their platforms going into last election, on dental care, on various other measures to try to come to aid of the most vulnerable Canadians, but also making sure that we can get our finances back in line. And I think that's one of the great advantages of having this supply and confidence agreement with one of the political parties, is that it gives government the opportunity over a 4-year window to get things right, to making sure that we are doing things responsibly, that we are minding the finances very carefully while we're making sure that we're responding to the needs of Canadians. That actually has been remarkable. And you're seeing now government revenues are a little higher than anticipated. That might not continue all the way through, but it allows us, again, by having that 4-year window, to carefully craft the policies which are needed and to present them in a fiscally responsible way.
And Matt, when the supply and confidence deal between the government and the NDP was announced, it was obviously very much in the spotlight. What do you make of how that deal has transpired, how that deal is at now? Obviously, it was announced in March, just a couple of months ago, and now here we are in September. What do you make of how some of the specific components of the deal have progressed?
Well, I obviously disagree. I wasn't supportive of the deal. I remain not supportive of the deal. I think Canadians had an opportunity in September of just last year to vote for a particular government, and they didn't vote for certain aspects of governments as well, including some of the things that were mentioned in the NDP platform. And now it's been thrust upon Canadians that this is what we're to present as a government, and often we found we see during debates the NDP and Liberal setting up and seem to be disagreeing with each other, but then supporting each other as things go forward. So it's I don't think it's any secret that I don't support the agreement, but it's something that we have before us, and I guess we'll try to make the best of it.
And Taylor, I'll go through the three of you on this topic as well as it relates to COVID-19 border measures that were the majority of them were lifted just a few days ago. What do you make of that, and what is kind of the NDP stance on especially the ArriveCAN app eliminating certain components of those travel measures?
Sure. So I'm happy to touch on the ArriveCAN and the border measures in a sec, but just responding to some of the talk around some of the things that we've managed to force the government to do that have been long-standing policies of the NDP. Just the other day we celebrated the 1-year anniversary since the last election. 1 year is not that long. Canadians just went to the polls and produced, a similar result to the 2019 election. And so I think, the prudent thing, the responsible thing to do is, instead of going to an election every year and being in this perpetual campaign mode, I think Canadians want us to try to find ways to get things done on their behalf. And that's really the opportunity of a situation like we have in the House of Commons right now. Now, speaking to the border measures, I think all three of us were happy to see some of those restrictions lifted. We still have questions about what criteria those decisions are made on, and concerned about the lack of transparency and explanation behind them. But for members of the traveling public, they want to get back to the point where they can travel freely, where they can travel efficiently across our border. Certainly heard from a lot of mayors of border towns who are frustrated with the ArriveCan app. So by and large, I think Canadians are welcoming that decision. Our questions continue to be around transparency and really explaining the rationale for all of these decisions that are ostensibly in the interest of public health. I think Canadians deserve to have the dots connected a little bit more than they have.
And Greg, on those COVID border measures, what do you make of, what has changed really in the past couple of months that a few months ago you weren't ready to eliminate these border measures, now here today you are ready to eliminate them?
Well, certainly what has changed is the advice of our scientific panel, which provides the government with their assessment of where things are at in Canada as well as around the world. So that obviously was the number one thing that had changed. But getting back to the point of what Canadians are feeling, I think we voted with our feet in terms of vaccinations. Canadians have very largely, over 90%, become fully vaccinated. Many have moved on to the third, fourth, and some their fifth vaccinations with the bivalent vaccine that's now available. I think these are good news. This is something that didn't exist 2 years ago, and it allows Canadians now to open up our economy fully. This is good news for our businesses. This is good news for Canadians. And look, if things change, we have to be prepared to change with them. But until that point, the way things are and the way that our panel has advised the Minister of Health, we can afford to open up our economy fully now and eliminate all the different measures which have restricted Canadians from traveling.
And Matt, what do you make of the timing of the announcement on these border measures?
Yeah, I certainly echo some of Taylor's skepticism on just the transparency of how these were put in place, how they've been lifted. The panel that Greg speaks of is something that we're not privy to as opposition. We don't see that science or the public doesn't get to see that science either. So from our perspective, looking back, it sure would have been nice to be able to have some of that available. But looking forward, it's certainly a very welcome announcement. It's certainly good to see that we're September 30th, October 1st, that a lot of the restrictions are being removed. We'd say remove them today if the science suggests us. But at the end of the day, I guess it's better than nothing to wait a few more days for this.
And then Taylor, just before we conclude, obviously once again your private member's bill. What is your final message to, I guess, your two colleagues with you here today, but also just your colleagues in general in the House of Commons?
Yeah, well, I guess I would ask my MP colleagues to take a real look at the experience around the world and think about all the young people across Canada that are passionate and engaged and informed, and think about what they have to offer Canada as a country. Democracy around the world is embattled right now, and we need to turn our minds to how we buttress against the headwinds we're seeing. I think that the change of lowering the voting age is one of many approaches that can really strengthen our democratic system. So I look forward to tomorrow's vote with some hope, some apprehension, and a lot of excitement.
Okay, MPs Greg Fergus, Matt Genroux, and Taylor Bachrach, thanks to you all for your time.
Thanks so much.
Joining me now to discuss his private member's bill to lower Canada's voting age to 16 is NDP MP Taylor Bachrach. Taylor, thanks so much for making the time. Let's start out. Obviously, your private member's bill is now in its final stages, you could say. What do you ultimately make of the process behind how it's, went through the House of Commons and how various other MPs have came to support it?
Well, it's been a real honor to bring this bill forward, Bill C-210, the Right to Vote at 16 Act. It's a bill I think would make Canada stronger by recognizing what young people have to contribute to our country. There are other countries around the world that have chosen to lower their voting ages to include 16 and 17-year-olds, and they've seen a lot of benefits in terms of political engagement and voter turnout. But really, I think this comes down to the fact that the issues that we're talking about in Parliament, in the room right behind me these days, issues like the climate crisis, like housing affordability and student debt, these are issues that have a profound impact on today's young people. They're the ones who are going to have to live with the impact of these decisions. And I think, and many people think, that they deserve a voice through our elections in those big matters that have so much consequence.
And what do you make of how various MPs have come to support this and how other MPs maybe haven't supported, but also various organizations? I know Vote 16, an organization that has very much supported this, and other organizations have come to the support of Bill C-210 as well. So what do you make of that?
I first brought this bill forward because it has a history of cross-party support in the House of Commons. It's an idea that's been brought forward in the past, not just by New Democrats like my colleague Don Davies, but by Liberals and by Green Party members. And so the hope was that we'd have enough cross-party support to pass it. Now, I have been gratified talking to my MP colleagues from all parties that there's quite a high level of interest in the bill and what it represents. Whether we have the votes that we need tomorrow when the vote occurs remains to be seen, but I know we've got strong support from New Democrats, from the Bloc Québécois, and from the Green Party, and a number of Liberals will be supporting it as well. We're going to work over the next 24 hours to convince as many of their Liberal colleagues and Conservatives. We'd love to have Conservative support for this bill because I think it represents a really important idea in our democracy.
Okay, MP Taylor Bachrach. Taylor, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Wyatt. Great to see you.